thank you for keeping us on the straight and narrow.
All right, we're recording. Did everyone get the little notice?
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, great. Well, I am delighted to see all of you. And Amy's taking notes, so I don't think we need to do a formal roll call. I think everybody knows everybody else here. I did want to, again, thank you for participating in this. This is and I'm going to hopefully keep this fairly short. My goal for both of the meetings that we have today is to only use as much time as we need to use for them. So hopefully we can give you back some of your time. We have two things to talk about today, but I also wanted Amy to do a brief synopsis of what the Programs Committee does and sort of what its role is relative to the Law Commission. Amy, would you mind just saying a little bit about that?
I'm happy to. So you all actually have probably much more experience with the program committee than I do, since so many of you have been on the commission and involved for several years. But as you know, the program committee is kind of that first level of review, a formal review on proposals that come forward to the Law Commission. And historically, it has met maybe once or twice a year to consider concepts and pass them on to the full commission if the program committee thinks it's a strong idea and worthy of additional consideration. The last couple of years, I think we've only had one program committee, or that's what I've been able to find. And the two proposals today are kind of interesting because they actually were previously considered, but because they were considered back in 2020, we thought that it was a good idea to do a check-in, see if there's still interest, see if there is any updated law or issues or policy questions that have come up over the last 4 years, and kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive before immediately saying this is a great idea or maybe this isn't going to work. So the two proposals this year are the Partition of Heirs Property and the Electronic Wills Act, and they both come from the Uniform Law Commission. And as you guys know, and we'll be talking about in an hour or so, one of our other proposals right now, the Limited Liability Corporations Act, is also from the Uniform Law Commission. So we do have, and the commission has a long history of working with the Uniform Law Commission on different proposals. The commission, I went back through the processes and procedures that I could find from previous iterations of the program committee, and the three factors that I found are so first, priority is given to private law issues that affect a large number of Oregonians and public law issues that are within the scope of an existing state agency. And then the commission also is asked to consider the resource demands of a particular issue, the length of time required for study and development of proposed legislation, and the probability of approval of the proposed legislation by the legislature and the governor. So that's kind of where the lens that we're supposed to be using to look at these concepts and see if they're a good fit for both Oregon and for the work of the commission. And then one of the things that we did this year that we haven't done in the past, I think, is Valerie talked about this back in June. We did something called subject matter panels, where we reached out to folks who had been in these practice areas generally, and it's, in this case, it's estate planning, and said, here are these two proposals that came up 4 years ago. We're interested in looking at them again if they still have are things that are necessary or appropriate to be done in Oregon, and also is there any particular red flag that we should know about. So we asked them specifically whether they were timely, whether there were any recent issues, and whether this was a good use of commission resources, because we are resource with me right now, and hopefully that will get more, but for at the moment I'm the resource. So we got the subject matter panels were interesting. We got a lot of feedback on, hey, if you guys are going to work on stuff, we're interested. I want to put my name forward for a work group. And we got a lot of feedback from agency folks and private practitioners saying that they would be interested. We didn't get as much feedback specific to the two proposals. We got positives on both. Hey, looks like it might be interesting. And we also got, hey, there are some questions here that I might have if we do dive into these. But the interest was there for working on something, but there wasn't a whole lot of strong feelings either way on either of the two proposals. But there was interest in working with the Law Commission on estate planning issues. So that was where the kind of the subject matter panels came down.
Well, and Amy, I want to interrupt you because I don't think we had equal support for both of the proposals. We had many more people express interest and support for the eWills project than the Partition of Heirs Property Act. So we'll talk more about that when we get to the actual proposal.
And that's, and I will also flag that we reached out to the Uniform Law Commission over the summer and talked to Ben Orzeski and Jane Hardaway, I think is her name, about the two proposals. And they were interested in working with us and were very gracious and chatty and all the things you want to hear from folks. So that was great. And then I also want to just flag that Lane is here, not only because he's a former commissioner and cannot leave the Oregon Law Commission behind, but also because he has very graciously agreed to, if we do move forward with the electronic wills proposal, he has agreed to chair that work group. So that's kind of where we are on the kind of an overview. And I will flag that PK was supposed to be here for part two for Partition of Heirs Property, but she had a last minute conflict come up and is not here today. So.
Great. Any questions about the process generally? Concerns, suggestions, thoughts? Great. Okay, so let's talk, because I think this is we want to talk about Heirs Property Act. So Amy, would you mind giving an overview of the Uniform Law Commission's Partition of Heirs Property Act? And Lane, also, if you have things to chime in on, because I know you're aware of these issues.
So I can, again, this is not my practice area, but I'll do what I can. And for those of you who are new to the commission, the Partition of Heirs Property Act proposal was originally approved in 2020 and a work group was created. Excuse me. The PK was the chair and Susan Gary, who's a former commissioner, was the reporter for the group. And they met once in March of 2020. And things got complicated in March of 2020, as you all remember. And coupled with a concern that the original members of the work group, they needed some more participation from real estate developers. And so the group went on hiatus. And generally the proposal, it's been passed in 24 states. Excuse me. And it creates kind of due process protections for folks with a tenancy in common, so that if mom passes away and leaves her house to her 3 children and one of them wants to sell the house and collect the money, the funds from the house, there are processes in place to make sure that one person doesn't mess up the inheritance for the other folks. There's a requirement for fair market appraisal. There's a requirement for, and I'm blanking on some of the other requirements. An opportunity for the other folks sorry, that was just an email about the meeting, the next meeting. There's an opportunity for, I'm lost my train of thought.
Notice. So
yeah,
the key aspects of the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act are that the idea is conceptually that it prevents speculative investors from coming in and forcing a sale of property that otherwise would be used to build wealth for a family. And I know in Portland, for example, this has been a real issue in the Albina district, which was historically an African American community. And you would have the homes be in the family, and obviously those homes would have been worth a lot more now than they were, 100 years ago. But there were a lot of sales that were forced because someone passed away or a speculator came in to buy them up and build the Lloyd District, for example. So there's things in Oregon's past that make this attractive. It has due process requirements like a right to, you have to give all the heirs notice. They have the right of first refusal. It has to be a commercially reasonable sale, and it's essentially can be judicially supervised to make sure that all of these elements are met. And what's interesting is that there's some sunlight aspects to it where, you can't have a sort of hidden sale that happens under cover of darkness. There has to be a lot of transparency to a transaction like that. My concern, and I appreciate, so PK has offered to chair this. She has an interest in this. I haven't talked with her about sort of what that stems from, but there are social justice aspects to this that are important. And Susan Gary, Professor Gary, has agreed to be the reporter on it, even though she is officially retired, I believe, at this point. I think it's a good proposal. A lot of work has gone into this. What I'm worried about is we've heard from nobody who wants to serve on the workforce, who wants to serve on the work group. And so, I'm concerned that this is a situation where we have a great idea, but no oomph behind it. And so from my perspective, I'm not sure if it's the right time for this act to move forward. I feel that it would be good for Oregon to have it in place, but I'm also not willing to run that work group and be on that work group because I just don't have time in my schedule right now. So that's why we wanted to bring it back to the group, because we sent this proposal out to the subject matter panel, the estate planning panel. And I think we did hear from a couple of folks who were like, oh, that's a good idea, but not with an emphasis, not with a willingness to move this forward and with a willingness to serve on that particular work group. So I don't know what the answer is. And I don't know if for those of you who have been on the programs committee before, if this is a situation that you've run into before where we have, a good proposal that, is conceptually we think should be a law in the state of Oregon, but where there's just not practitioner interest in getting it from point A to point B. Thoughts? Yeah. Judge James.
So I have a question. Is there, I sort of think that it might be like a small Oregonian problem as opposed to a large Oregonian problem. And I'm not, and that's maybe speaks to why there's not like a well of interest in it. I could be completely wrong because I don't know very much, if anything, about it. But I wonder about that. And then I wonder about whether this is something that legislatively is a hot button issue for, I don't know, rural people versus people who don't own property. I don't know if there's any sort of an issue that we're not seeing, and whether there would be a wellspring of support for it legislatively if we were to put all the work in. So those are my 3 questions.
I think those are great questions. I don't know what the answers are to those. And one thing that I don't know if this committee can do is go back to folks who want the bills to succeed with questions and say, we think this is a great proposal, but, we have these questions and here are some concerns about the viability of the project. Because I do think that who is this bill designed to help? Like, I can see it in a historic perspective, right? I mean, I can definitely see it because I have some friends whose families owned projects in Lower Albina or owned houses in Lower Albina that their family no longer owns. But it was a while ago. And is it a problem that we have now? I don't know the answer to that. Any other questions or thoughts about the proposal?
This is Rep Wallen. my question is, how broadly has it been put out to practitioners to find out if there's somebody we're not thinking of who might care about it? And I could imagine a legislator caring about it enough to carry the water on it. Does it need to be worked through this group? Is the bar section on estate planning, have they been asked if anyone there is interested in it? I just want to, I mean, if this group
Yeah.
doesn't have any interest, that doesn't necessarily mean there's not someone out there who might care.
Yeah, that's a great question. We did send it out to the estate planning panel, which has folks, which is principally composed of estate planning attorneys. And it got kind of crickets. We didn't send it out to the full listserv, and maybe that's something we should do to get a better sense for who this would be interested in. Because it's one of the larger bar sections.
Right.
So that might be a good idea. Yep, Lane.
Yeah, thanks. If you don't mind, not being a member of the committee, but knowing a little bit about this, I appreciate that this is not a hot button issue in Oregon. I can't say that it doesn't, that it isn't an issue. I can say that this would be, I fall under probably the category of low hanging fruit for the Law Commission. If you were to undertake this, it's been very well received across the country in rural states and urban states. I'm looking at the map. We got Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, along with Washington, New York, Massachusetts, looks like Connecticut, California, Nevada, states all over the spectrum that have adopted this. And you probably wouldn't need a large work group because I think, as Representative Wallen said, this is probably as close to a plug and play kind of act as you could ask for. And after the work that you've put in for the last several years on the LLC Act, might be kind of a relief to have something that they actually can move quickly. And I think it would be very popularly received if you got it. So that's just, that is my comment. I agree. It is not an issue that is a burning platform here in Oregon, but it speaks to social justice and remedying historic wrongs that I think people, when they're introduced to the concept and what it's designed to protect against, tend to view very favorably. Not many people out there speaking up for the Snidely Whiplash folks who come in and buy these inherited interests and then forced sales.
True. Absolutely true. Dean Dobbins, I think you had raised your hand.
Actually, I think it was me, but
Oh, was it you?
I was just wondering on the interim deans. We're all
I know it's
in addition to the urban thing, I was just wondering, could this also be an issue for families with land that are hovering around the edges of urban growth boundaries? So that's what I was thinking of, because like Valerie, I was thinking a lot of the urban stuff may be more historical, I hope, and that as opposed to ongoing. But I did wonder about that. I'd like to think that if I owned land near an urban growth boundary, I would have planned everything out, but I'm certain that not everyone has. So I can see, I'm just kind of backing up Lane a little bit, I guess. I can see some value for this, even if there doesn't seem to be a constituency of people when we reach out to the lawyers.
Chief Judge Legason.
Yes, and this is just a sort of species of Representative Wallen's comment, but I do wonder if this is a marketing issue, in that I just looked up the act and found the American Bar Association's description of what's going on. It makes it much more exciting than our description, and I think it could easily. I think but it looks like it. Instead of just going to real property and probate law, obviously there's expertise there. There is a lot of interest in sort of fair housing, anti-discrimination, the civil rights groups, and so I think if we were to distribute the information as described by the ABA, or maybe extract the Uniform Commission site, looks a little more dry, a little more like our proposal, it might catch people's attention. in a way that generated both enthusiasm for participation, and then, you know, as Lane has said, it looks like it's not a lot of work, because this looks like it's had a wide degree of success across the country of being adopted if you get people to carry it.
Yes, Judge James.
I was also thinking, I'm mindful of what went on or is going on in Hawaii with the Lahaina fires, and the efforts that are made to kind of come in and sort of make the best offer to the weakest party that owns part of the property, and you know, and try to financially help them sort of, but then to get the land. And I think about that because of the all of the fires, you know, that Oregon is seeing, and in rural areas and with rural land. And so it may be something that would be nice to plug that hole so that it is a better outcome for people who find themselves in a real severe trauma experience.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point, Judge James, because I do think that that's a situation I can see, you know, in Southern and Eastern Oregon, for example, that really have been hit hard by wildfires in the last few years. You know, I don't know, Representative Wallen, I know that's your constituency. I don't know, are they having issues with predaceous developers down there?
No, because of
Okay.
the nature of what was burned.
Yeah.
I have not heard that at all, actually, but it could have.
Right. And you could see something potentially like closer to the population centers where it might be, I mean, I think that's a really, really valid point, and thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I agree with that point, even though it might not have specifically happened in this case.
Yeah.
It's not hard to imagine.
I
Yeah.
wonder also whether it would be worthwhile on that score to reach out to like the Stolburn firm that has been plaintiffing a lot of the wildfire cases, and find out whether they've heard from their clients any of these kinds of problems. Also, I was thinking the Commons Law Center might be a likely candidate to support working on this bill, given that they do estate planning and probate work, and they do it in particularly for people who are, you know, they serve people just above the legal aid income level.
Yeah, I talked briefly with Akua Hackman, who has the city grant to be, you know, helping with wealth transfers within those communities, making sure that houses stay, for example, as a wealth building asset for folks. And she was interested, but I think she's stretched pretty thin, just commitment wise.
She was originally on the original work group,
Yeah.
and participated 4 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wonder if what we can do then is recommend that this move forward, because I think particularly based on what Judge James said, that it's something that we may be able to get folks from other groups, not just estate planning, to weigh in on. So real property and business, and maybe even some of the local bar associations in areas where they have had wildfire activity. Because yeah, I mean, you would hate to have what happened in Lower Albina happen in other areas of the state. So, I think what Lane's saying too is that is valid, and that this is not going to be a difficult sell once we get the right folks around to vet it. I just don't want it to people to spend 6 years on it and then, you know, have it go nowhere. So, okay, any further discussion on this one?
I would just throw into the mix. I noticed that in the report, there's a mention of the fact that there's at least some federal law out there that suggests that there's preference for certain farmlands to states that enact a version of this, which just maybe some added incentive in the mix here.
Okay, yeah.
And I will flag that Susan Gary reached out to Thomas Mitchell, who was a member of the drafting committee at the Uniform Law Commission, and he's provided some additional names with a particular rural focus. Since the email went out to you all with a write-up of
Oh, okay, good.
so we have some names that he suggested. from the Oregon Agriculture Trust and the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts, as two groups that might be also interested, and I just have not reached out to them yet.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think if we think about it in those terms, it makes a lot more sense from my perspective, and we should be able to get folks. Yes, Professor Bell.
Thanks. This is not my area whatsoever, but I wonder if reaching out to Legal Aid Society or other organizations that help to improve access to justice might be interesting, because it might be an issue that people are facing when they don't have money to hire private counsel. I don't know if
definitely do
it's
that.
true or not,
Yeah.
but it seems like it could be an access to justice issue for folks.
Great, thank you. Good suggestion. Any other thoughts? Okay, so I guess with that, do we want to take a vote on moving this forward to the full commission? With the knowledge that there's still going to be some work to do in getting the work group members signed up to do it? Yes, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Since that was unanimous, I don't think so. Okay, so let's move this one forward. And thank you all for your good discussion on that. So the next proposal we have is the electronic wills proposal. And Amy, do you want to briefly go over that one? We've had more folks weigh in favor of this one.
I'm actually going to punt to Lane on this one, since
okay.
he very
That's true.
graciously.
Lane, would you like to say a few words about the eWills project?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to bring that up on the website to see. Amy, do you know how many states have enacted that so far?
I have it right here. Let me just go to there.
14 states, District of Columbia. And
Yeah,
US Virgin
okay,
Islands.
so it is one that is getting momentum.
Yeah.
It looks like you've got several, you got enactments that are pending, or introductions, I should say. This is one, I'll be honest, when I first heard about it, I was skeptical. It sounds kind of like a brave new world to move into electronic wills. But you know, I have come around to it, and because in fact, it is the direction that the world is moving, and technology is going to inexorably take us there. So we ought to have the legal framework in place to support electronic wills. One of the, you know, I think the big concerns about going into e-wills was technology and security. You know, how do you protect these things? How do we know when they're done? That they've been done with the proper requirements for execution of wills. I think a lot of those concerns were allayed when the Law Commission, the Oregon Law Commission, did the Remote Notarization Act here several years ago. Again, the same kind of concerns. How do you do a notarization remotely when the notary isn't even in the same room as the person who's signing the document? Happily, there are firms that have the technology that make this possible. It is secure, and in some respects, remote can be even more secure than in-person kind of execution. And so, and I would say too that I think the estate bar was initially skeptical of e-wills as well. It's just kind of new and different, but I think that there is enough support for it, enough interest in it, and enough justification to take this up. I can't say that this is going to be low-hanging fruit necessarily, because I think there are going to be people who still have concerns about it, but it is definitely an achievable project. And I would be happy to chair the group, as Amy said, if there's interest in going forward on it.
And Eric Foster out of Medford has agreed to be our reporter for this one. And he's great. So one thing that I think, so my understanding of the history of this with the Law Commission is that it was a proposal that was moved forward, that a work group put together. And the pandemic happened, and then there was some concern among the probate judges about some of the security and safety of e-wills and, you know, fraud. How do we make the technology work? But I agree with Lane in that, you know, I think a lot of the concerns that folks had about these documents were similar to concerns folks had about remote notarization, and the world has not ended in the years that we've had remote notarization. And folks are doing more and more by DocuSign, and of course, testamentary documents are, you can't electronically sign them. So, I mean, they're specifically carved out of the Electronic Signatures Act. So I think this would just be I think this would be a spirited discussion among the work group members on how to make this work. But I think it has the potential to help a lot of folks in Oregon who can't necessarily get to an estate planning attorney easily. So I do think there's an access to justice aspect to this. Access justice aspect. Sorry, it's early and I'm not quite caffeinated enough yet. So, so I am in favor of this one, and I do think that we've had more folks saying, yes, I'd be willing to step up and help with this one. So it won't require quite as much fine tuning of the marketing as the partition of heirs one. Thoughts?
I will add that there was some discussion generally on the estate planning listserv around this concept. And there were opinions on both sides and a healthy conversation. So some people are ready for it and some people are not. And also one piece of feedback we got from the subject matter panels was, hey, I'm not sure if this is a great idea, but I definitely think it's something we should be talking about. So that was some feedback as well. And I will pass that on. I know this was a question with remote notarization a few years ago, is what's going on our borders in Washington, Idaho, and California in terms of remote notarization. And Washington and Idaho have passed electronic wills.
Yeah, and the world has not ended there either. I just think that this is, and it will be mining. I don't always read my estate planning listserv because there's just the volume is unbearable sometimes. But we can mine those spirited people who are discussing things for work group members too. Yes, Judge James.
It also might be something that we want to do some particular outreach to probate judges.
Yes.
Because they tend to be pretty protective of what they do and knowledgeable, but sometimes, you need to kind of address the fears before you can move forward.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a really valid suggestion when we're looking at who are we going to put on this work group, because we certainly don't want to put something as forward as a proposal and then have the probate judges come forward and say, well, this is going to end up in my court and it's going to be a disaster, right? So I think figuring out how to address those concerns is huge. And I don't think we'd want to move forward without probate judges. The trick will be finding ones, who are willing to serve, because I know everybody's very, very busy right now. So
if I can offer on that, just one name, Rita Cobb. Judge Cobb has worked with the commission on some probate projects before, and she's an excellent participant. And she's either a senior judge or retired now, I forget, certainly has the time, but also has years and years and years of experience in probate, and a lot of respect among the probate judges, I think.
Wonderful. Good. Well, we'll definitely be reaching out to folks for suggestions, or, if you have names that come to mind, please do email them to me or to Amy. We are not shy about asking folks to help. Okay. Any other discussion, or shall we vote on moving this one forward? This seems less controversial to me. Okay, so all in favor? Any opposed? No, that was unanimous, so nobody's opposed. Great, thank you all. Appreciate that. So we'll be bringing these to the January meeting of the Law Commission, which will give us some time to do additional research into who may be willing to serve. And then I think we just wanted to give you a heads up about a couple of potential future proposals that we'll be seeing. Well, I'll let Amy start off with the Muni and Justice Courts Part 2.
So I did want to just add one more thing on the two proposals that you all just approved. Going back through the materials from program committees in years past, one of the things that was not explicit but seemed to be suggested was that the creation of the work group was part of the process post-program committee, pre full committee. So that kind of outreach that you all are talking about and like, hey, we haven't heard a lot from folks. Like my understanding is that something that would happen now, but I will defer to people who have the institutional
Sounds great
knowledge
to
that I do
me.
not have. But just so you know that seems to be the process in the past based on some of the paperwork I've seen. But I will jump to the Muni and Justice Courts appeals process, and Justice Duncan is here as well. And I might use her as a lifeline if questions come up that I cannot answer. So as you all know, the Muni and Justice Courts group has been meeting since 2020. We do have a bill that you all will be talking about in about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And the bill there's been a lot of cleanup, reorganization, some substantive changes that we'll talk about in 45 minutes or so. But there have also been a handful of issues that have been raised that we did not have time to complete. And so I think right now we're at maybe 5 or 6 specific issues. And then also just a kind of maybe there's going to be some cleanup for unintended consequences. So there is interest from that particular work group on addressing additional issues in the future. And part of that report indicates, very similar to the direct criminal appeals report from 5 years ago or 6 years ago, that, hey, a subsequent work group might be a good idea to continue this conversation. So my understanding is that the bill today that you all were talking about today, LC 156, is complete where it is. But we have also identified these additional issues that may be people are interested in discussing further in the future. So
I view it as analogous. Sorry, Amy. I view it as analogous to the probate modernization workforce, where you had a group of people who were tasked with identifying issues within the probate process, and out of that came several different proposals. And they were interrelated and built off each other. And so I view what we're likely to see from another round of municipal and justice court hearings as sort of just a continuation of the process, like we did with probate modernization. So we just wanted to flag that as an option, we're likely to be talking about this at our next program committee meeting once we start getting more details around what that would look like. And then I did want to talk briefly about the Model Corporation Act. This is another act, much like the Revised Uniform LLC Act, which is Senate Bill, what? I always forget the number.
LC 266.
Oh, LC 266. Senator Brzezinski has very kindly agreed to introduce this as a committee bill for the spring term, 2025 session, if we move it forward out of the full commission. But the Model Corporation Act is sort of the next phase of this, because if we look at the frequency of entities filed in Oregon, LLCs are at the top far and away, just because of the nature of business in Oregon. But I think we have interest from the business bar, we have interest from other folks in the community be getting involved with looking at the Model Corporation Act and going through a similar sort of, is this right for Oregon? What can we do to modernize our processes so that things are as easy and as intuitive as possible for business owners? So we'll be looking to talk with this committee in the future about that. And we'll be looking to find someone to serve as a chair and reporter for both of these. Okay. Any questions about sort of what's in the hopper? We remain open to other proposals. So if folks have things that they hear about that they think would be good for Oregon, I know I've been hearing things about certain criminal proposals You know, for example, I know Cody had mentioned that someone approached him about a Criminal Procedures Act. So but those are, you know, speculative at this point. So anyhow, so we'll just watch this space, but if things come up that we should be looking at, definitely let me or let Amy know, and we can figure out how to get it into the right format for this group to review. Any other questions? Anything else for the good of the order? Great. I'm going to give you 17 minutes back, and I will see you back here in just a little bit. Thank you all.
You.